playing in the NFL is different. And I was at the bottom of the barrel. If I don't make a play just in practice, that I was going to get cut. Everyone in the NFL doesn't make millions of dollars. I think I was making league minimum, which is $250,000 a year. And I actually ran into a wall when I finished playing in the NFL because it was hard for me to get a job. So I had to live off that little bit of money that I made. So I was probably only bringing home like 150, 175 of that. First project that I did here in Reading, I bought a house for $399. I would have had to have probably $1 million cash to start that project. I had like 75, and I was able to start without anybody's input. I was able to build what I wanted to build. My wife was like, we'll never be able to sell this, but we felt God on it. Somehow I've become like the Scandi builder in Reading.
Hey, this is the Money Hole Podcast. I'm Chris Lamb. Please make sure to like, subscribe, download. That is so I can get awesome people to find this podcast and hear the message that we're bringing. Today, I'm here with my friend, James Bethea. What's up, buddy?
How you doing?
I'm doing good, man.
Nice.
You're getting a pretty good name in Reading. A lot of people are happy you're here. I was at a coffee shop this morning hanging out with Dan Ferreira and, gosh, I'm totally drawing blank. David Stein showed up and it's like we were all talking about
those are my people.
We were talking about you, man. We were just talking about how like we're so grateful in Reading that you're here because Reading's an interesting place. I mean, for so many reasons, and we can talk about that. I mean, you're an ex-NFL player who moved from a place where, from what you've shared with me, you had a booming business, all kinds, and you came to this little mountain town in the middle of nowhere that's not on the way to anywhere, and with your family. So it's a very interesting place. But one thing about Reading that we've all been talking about is how there's so many spaces in our town that has not had a lot of competition. Specifically, and man, I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to be honest, construction. When it comes to the creativity and the ability to make things that are artistic and that are cool. I mean, for the longest time, we've just kind of had the typical, 3-2 stucco finish type houses. And I totally understand for contractors, it's hard to make money here.
Yeah.
But, these guys and so many people are happy you're here. I'm happy here because, you're building some incredibly cool houses that people are willing to pay for because they're custom. They don't look like anything that's ever been built here before. And so, yeah, man, people are so happy you're here, man.
Yeah.
Plus, you're a great guy.
I'm happy to be here too. This place kind of changed my family's life. So this is, it's a blessing for me to be here. And I think one of the things that I actually think about for everything, not just construction, I think the cost of entry in Reading for entrepreneurs or business people is very low.
Yeah.
Especially compared to the Bay. I mean, the first project that I did here in Reading, I bought a house for $399, got a conventional mortgage on it that came with 3 additional lots on it for $399. That same property in the Bay, $1 million easy.
Yep.
I mean, and then permits and everything else. I mean, I would have had to have probably $1 million cash to start that project. I had like 75 and I was able to start what I call a micro subdivision without anybody's input. I was able to build what I thought was, honestly, what I wanted to build. And it's like, if you build it, they will come. Like, that's kind of how I thought. I mean, there was instances when we built our first, when we built our first house, or our house in Reading, I'm sorry. My wife was like, we'll never be able to sell this. This thing is so specific, but we felt God on it. And that Scandi modern feel, it really derived from like a mission trip I went to in Mexico back 2 years ago. And I'm like, and we were building sheds at like rocket speed. You're like 4 walls, engineered truss.
Where was that?
In Ensenada.
Okay. Was that like the Oaxacan people?
No, I'm not super specific, but
I think I've been down there.
Okay. But it was, it's a YWAM base.
Okay.
And they build these basically tough sheds on steroids, and we just blow through. We could build like 3 or 4 in a week.
That's so cool.
A weekend. And I'm like, how do we take this? How do I use this? How do we take this back? How do I build the house this easy? And as I started scrolling through Pinterest, I fell upon like that Scandi modern. And the basis of what Scandi modern is like a simple structure with high-end finishes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, really simple to build. The problem is you got to put high end finishes in them. Yes. You really got to dial it in.
Yep.
And so I built our house like this, and then somehow I've become like the Scandi, the Scandi builder in Reading.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty much what I build. But it's a blessing to be able to come out here and build exactly what I felt I wanted to build.
Yeah.
Which has always been my dream since I was probably 8 or 9 years old. It's just to build cool stuff.
They're so cool, and we'll put some pictures in the video, so people can see it. But I think that what Reading, a town like Reading, and so many places need is they need someone to sort of be a trailblazer. And before you, just to give credit, I think you and I talked about this, but there are a few builders here who've built some really cool houses.
Yep.
There's definitely quite a few. And there's
shout out to Arvid.
Arvid, yeah, we talked.
Yeah,
Arvid's stuff's incredible.
Yeah, I think he's one of the best. I think he is the best builder in town.
Yeah, his stuff. Yeah, but he just don't want to build 20 of them.
I know.
He just wants to build one.
He wants to build one at a time. Yeah, just a different mentality.
Yep.
I want to build 50 of them.
Yeah.
He wants to build one and do it perfect.
50 of them. I want to see our whole town get built, because we got a lot of old houses here that need replacing. But it's kind of this story of, someone comes to a market and sees what the people who live here don't see, because you came from a different market and you saw that opportunity. And then you do something and you show people what's possible and you raise the bar, and it's like, I have this other developer that does, he's doing more subdivisions, high density, high volume. And he's had a really hard time selling properties here compared to Sacramento and some of the other markets he's in. And one of the things he told me while he was here, and this is a guy who at the peak a couple of years ago, he was part of LGI. He was like part of 5,000 homes a month getting built nationwide.
Wow.
So he's super legit. He really knows the industry well.
Yeah.
And he was just telling me that one of the things he saw in a small town like Reading is how the difference in mentality with so many people, how slow they are, how expensive it is. And because I wouldn't have thought that, man. I didn't realize. I just thought you go to the city, everything costs more. And he was like, no.
Yeah.
It's faster and it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And he was explaining that to me, and it just blew my mind. He's like, what they need is some competition.
Yeah.
He's like, competition makes everyone better. And I've heard that before. That's definitely true for my industry.
No, very much so.
There's some of the best people in the nation that do what I do here in Reading. Yeah. And there's some amazing real estate brokers here that are like top in the country, but there's so many industries that they just haven't had a reason to raise their bar.
Yeah. I actually, that's an interesting comment. I am not one to compete against other people, so I don't know how that I really compete against myself. But when I first got here, I actually
for the NFL, of course. Minor detail.
I actually went to the city and said, "Hey, is this all we can build?"
Yeah.
Like, is there like a prescriptive method in all of Reading where you have to build a 3-2, 4-2 stucco, 6 gables? Was that the standard? And they're like, no, just no one builds anything else. And I almost got caught up in it. Like, my first design for the Pebble project was like just tipping the scale of that mid-century modern, but with some like traditional vibes to it, because I was like, I'm not sure that I could sell something. And then I said, you know what? Like, I'm just going to go all in on exactly what I think Reading needs. Or even better, I need to sell 4 homes to myself. There's people like me who move to Reading all the time, that move from big cities, who want to come out here and want to have a dope house. They don't want to settle. They want a high-end home. They don't need a lot of land. They just want something that's borderline perfect. And I built the house for our family if we were to move here again 4 years ago. So who's our target market? It's myself 4 years ago. And so I just honed in on what would I want, an office, how many bedrooms would I want? And I just honed in on that specific thing. And then the design, I wanted it to be something that when people drive by, they have either never seen it before, or they see it and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're building stuff like this in Reading. And there are people who, shout out to Rad Design. there are people who are designing dope stuff.
Oh man.
The problem is how I get caught up in this. How do we build dope stuff and it actually be within a price that like people could afford?
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard part with some of the architects that I've seen, not just here, but also in the Bay, is you design something because there's no, you just design what the homeowner wants you to design.
You can dream anything up.
Exactly. And then I get it and I go, what was the budget for this? I'm like, this has to be a $3 million budget. And they're like, oh no, we're looking at like $700,000 or $800,000. And I'm like, well, this isn't a $700,000, $800,000 home. This is like a $2 million home. And so I think trying to bridge that gap between cool homes and affordability that's what I'm trying to do, because that's what I would have wanted.
I mean, it's working. I mean, you're selling them and people are attracted to what you're doing out there, and you know, you're not doing it during the easiest time in the housing market.
No.
You know, it's, I mean, you could almost say anybody that decides to build homes in any market, though, there's going to be some challenges, right?
Yeah. Whether it was COVID.
Yeah. I mean,
whether it was interest rates are high or low, or there's too much competition or.
Totally, man. I was talking to somebody today and he was doing a portfolio loan because his income situation was tricky several years back. And I think he got like a 5.5%. And he was telling me we were laughing because he was telling me at the time, he was like, man, that's a high rate, man. I'm gonna have to refinance it at some point. And, you know, he hasn't refinanced it yet. And I was like, hey, that turns out that rate was pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, so I when we built our home, they locked us in on a construction loan for a 30-year, which was, now looking back, hindsight 2020 was great.
Yep.
But people were still getting interest rates in 3.5%, 4% at the time. And I closed at, I think, 4.25. And I was like, oh man, that's so high. But now, I mean,
always going to be the way it is. I mean, I was in Chico, California, like 10 years ago, talking to a big broker down there. We were hanging out. He was doing a home inspection. And I was like, hey, I'd like to buy some multi-unit properties down here. I'm looking for a pretty good deal, though. And he's like, okay, what do you mean when you say good deal?
Yeah.
He said, because in my mind, real estate's always a good deal about a year from now. And I've never forgotten
That's funny. That's a good point.
A guy named Steve Deppa. He's a broker in Chico. Shout out to Steve. Doubt he'll hear this. We haven't talked since, but I did remember that quote. That's awesome. So true, man. And that's something, you know, kind of segue into the market right now. One of the things that I try to do with this podcast is talk to millennials and people that are families that are trying to figure out how to make the best decisions they can to put their family in a better position.
Yeah.
And to give them real tactics and ideas. And that's one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on, not because you build homes, but because you're a guy who's done a lot of things in your life, been around a lot of people, and now you're in this place where, at least from my understanding of you and people I talk to, like you try to help a lot of people. You try to teach people how to put themselves in a better position so they could afford a good house someday, but more importantly, to make good financial decisions in their life. And, you know, it's harder than it's been maybe ever right now because of inflation. You know, I would say runaway inflation at this point. I mean, we just got the numbers again in February, and the numbers were higher than they expected. It went up, you know, and even with the Fed raising rates 13 times, they're having a really hard time getting the cost of things down. And, you know, that's a major concern for a lot of us in our industry right now, because when the Fed is raising rates and when inflation is high, that means rates are going to stay high. And it's going to be harder for people to borrow. It's going to be harder for people to make moves and do things. Things cost more money. And so, you know, what are some of the things that you're seeing right now that, like, if you could go back and tell yourself in your 20s what you've learned, what would be some of the things you would tell yourself to do to put yourself in the best possible position?
Yeah, I mean, I think there, honestly, I don't think there's anything to lose. I mean, if I had to tell myself something, and I actually did, I bought a house cash when I first got in the NFL. And I was like, oh, I can't lose money on this. And then 2008 hit.
It's better than Bentleys and gold chains.
No, it was. I did. I drove like I think I drove like a $19,000 car, but I bought a house cash and it went underwater. And I barely could get the money
what year was that?
It was 2008. So I bought the house in 2006, 2007, and the market.
Like the exact wrong time.
The perfect time. The perfect time to buy a house. But with that said, me and my actually closest friend and business partner right now, he bought his house at the same time and just held it. And it took a while for it to get back, but it did. And so for me, when I talk to people who are like just getting or thinking about building homes, like, hey man, you have to start with one. I actually don't know how it works, and you could probably tell them more about it. But like once you buy one, it opens up the realm of like possibilities of what you can and cannot do, whether it's improvements. For instance, our story, we bought a little mid-century modern, the best house in the worst neighborhood.
Stacking them up.
complete opposite. I think it was in 2000, right as the market started to come back up. I think it's 2013. And this was when Tiny House Living, there's a TV show, came on, and me and my wife are super crazy. And we were like, dude, we should build a tiny house and live in it. The problem is we couldn't find a place to put it. And so we decided to turn our garage, our detached garage, into an ADU before ADUs were a thing.
Okay. And where was this?
This was in Martinez, like the Walnut Creek area of the Bay Area. And the goal was to rent that out.
Yep.
So I actually had never picked up a hammer at that point. And I told my wife, oh, I could turn this into a livable space easy.
Yep.
So like I just go down the road of like figuring out how to draw plans on my own. I did everything my own, from like the conception of like drawing plans to getting it permitted, to getting it finalized, framing. I learned on my own. I was like, oh, I need to frame some walls. I would watch like 50 videos online on how to frame a wall, how to run plumbing, how to do texture. I did every part. I didn't sub any part of it out.
Wow.
I did every part on my own. And then at the end of the day, it was like a dope little spot. It was only 400 square feet.
You saved a ton of money.
I think I paid $28,000.
You had no kids yet?
We had one kid.
Okay.
I had one kid. So, a little bit of freedom.
Yeah, you had time. Yeah.
Yeah, I had time. And I fell in love with building. I remember my wife coming in one day and I'm like hammering away, have my music blazing. And she's like, hey, babe, like you need to shut it down. But all the windows were covered because I was painting.
Yep.
She's like, babe, you need to shut it down. Like you're way too loud. And I'm like, oh, it's only like 6 o'clock. She's like, it's not 6, it's 3 a.m. But I was having I was in the zone.
Lost track of time.
I did. It was like the Vegas casinos where they were pumping oxygen in there. I don't know what I was on, but like I got
a little bit of paint.
Exactly. I got lost in the sauce and I was like, man, I could have kept going for hours. And the entire project, it was 12-hour days. And when I was finished, it wasn't that I wanted to finish it. It's like
you were energized by it.
I loved it, man. And so going back to like what we were talking about, it's like buying a place, fixing it up, or finding a place with 2 units.
Yeah, dude. There's so much to what you just said.
Yeah, just like finding like a creative way. I think you're working with the Bylers right now. Elmer and his wife, they just had a baby. And the same thing, they're looking for a place that like has a renter in it, or I mean, there's so many creative options if you have a job. That you could get into something, and you just have to start. The reality of it is my grandmother bought her house she bought 4 houses. She paid like 19% or something when she bought them. Yeah, she only paid $34,000 for them. but
minor details.
But $34,000 was a lot of money.
It was.
19% was high.
Cokes were 5 cents.
Yeah, exactly. Cars were $8,000. I mean, so the reality of it is at some point, or with that, my grandmother's daughter is going to inherit a home that she bought for $34,000. That's now worth like $800 to $1 million. And you talk about
the wealth.
You talk about generational wealth. That's a game changer.
It is.
So when I say just find something that you could get into that's livable and then start from there. And that what that first house did, it allowed us to. We actually stayed in the tiny house or Airbnb. Mm-hmm. We stayed there, and then we rented out our main house to our youth pastors, and we didn't pay a mortgage for an entire year.
Wow.
And they got a great deal because the going rate was about $2,800 to $3,000, but we had a good interest rate. So they only had to pay like $22,000 a month. So all they, I just,
2,000.
Sorry, 2,200.
That's what it cost.
Yeah, exactly. So it was $2,200 a month, and we didn't pay a mortgage for an entire year. And then it showed on our taxes, it showed that we made more money. Yep. So from that, we went and bought another house. Yep. We renovated it, and it just opened up the doors for so many things. And then we sold both of those houses and then moved up here. I mean, the moral of the story, what I tell people is, hey, you just have to find a way to get into one.
And you got to get started.
That's great.
There's so many things to what you said. The first thing I want to talk about is, or just kind of, I want to point out a couple. There's so many tactics in your story. The first one that jumps out at me is you bought a house in 2008. Like, let's just say the wrong time to buy a house. That's everyone wants to time the market, right?
Wrong time.
And it's like, I know so many people, including myself. I bought a house in 09. And if, let's say you bought a house in 2008 and you didn't know the housing market was about to crash, the worst one in history, arguably. And let's say that you sell the house in 2012 and you lose $200,000 from what you paid for it, right? Well, a lot of people would say, well, I lost $200,000. Well, no, you lost a lot more than that, because if you had held it all the way through 2024, and now that house is worth $1 million.
Yeah.
You actually lost $600,000. And that's what a lot of people don't think about when it comes to buying and holding. Psychology, because of fear and greed, which is what drives all financial markets, usually real estate too, is people want to buy at the top of the market when everybody else is doing it.
Yep. That's
what happened in 2020.
Yep.
And then when everyone's afraid in the stock market or the housing market, and you see people selling or not buying, everyone wants to pull back.
Yep.
And what's really hard is to do things in the opposite direction of the rest of the crowd. But like, that's what actually usually pays off the most, right? And that's happened to me, man. I've sold assets when everything was getting bad and I was scared and I lost money. And it's like, man, if I would have held, there's not a single asset up into this point in my life, including Bitcoin, which I thought I'd be right there, that I didn't sell when things were rough, that if I would have just been patient and held on, I would have done really, really well. Like, there's not one thing in my life because of inflation that I should have held. So that's important, is don't time the market. Things will always work out in the long run if you can make it work. You also said, get a job and just get started. I mean, I was just talking to someone today and he was like, man, I want to know. And I love this question because this was a young guy and he just got married and he wasn't in the best position to buy yet because of his income. He started a business. And so I talked about all his options. He said, what I really want, Chris, is I'd love to get advice to put myself in the best position to buy.
It's a great question.
I said, man, that's the best question you could ask me.
Yep.
And because I have so many other people that once you tell them, like, you can't buy a house right now today, it's almost like, well, then I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like that, this mentality that I want what I want and I want it now. So when people have that heart that I'm willing to do whatever I need to do, I just need someone to show me.
Yep.
And so we started talking. He's like, for me, this was my faith in action.
Yeah.
Like, calling you and just making this call. And I said, dude, that's such a great way to look at this, man. Yeah. I was like, if you just keep doing that and you just keep asking people how to put yourself in that position, when you see a wall, you ask, there's probably somebody that will show me how to get around it or go above it or go through it.
That's good.
I was like, if you're going to get there, I guarantee it. Like, that's all you need, is to have that attitude. And what else did you say in that? You also talked about how buying a house and doing it the work yourself. A lot of people ask me right now, hey, prices haven't gone down, rates are higher. We can barely afford a mortgage payment right now, but we're paying so much in rent. We're having another kid. And if we rent what we need, it's going to cost as much as a mortgage. So we kind of have to buy. What do you recommend? I said, you know what? I've never seen someone fail who finds a good location and finds the thorn of the neighborhood. And you get beer and pizza, you invite your friends over, your pastor, your work buddies, and you guys do cosmetic work. You find discounted flooring, discounted carpet, and you guys just take some time to put that sweat equity in with your friends and family helping you for a couple of years. I've never seen that plan fail.
No,
not once.
Well, and we're in a different era where I think there's two things, which I don't normally do it, but I get asked this all the time. But when I first learned, I literally watched hours of videos on how to install flooring.
Yep.
By the time I was done, I could tell anybody how to do it. I may not have known how to do it, but I could actually like walk someone through the process because I had watched so many videos on how to texture, how to floor, how to do all this stuff because we actually didn't have the money. I think we had 28, I guess that is a little bit of money, but we had $28,000 and I was like, well, I'm just going to make it work and I'm going to do all the work myself. But being able to do the work yourself in this new world of AI or in the new technology world, like you
can do anything.
You could do anything.
You can do anything. I mean anything.
Yeah, I mean learning. When this was a while ago, 5 or 6 years ago, when I was raising money to start my project, I watched 30 videos on how to raise money for a project, and I just basically copied it. I mean, you can literally learn how to do anything. And I think the other thing that we're in this new world of consulting, and people ask me, "Oh, can you help? Can you come over and like I'll pay you to like walk me through what I need to do and how to do it." So there's like two different worlds that you could tap into. There's no excuse why you couldn't buy a fixer upper and at first just paint it.
Yep.
And then start to chip away at like all these little things that need to get done or that you could do on your own. So the only thing I won't do is drywall, but other than that, I mean, the sky's the limit. You really can do anything.
You can, man. I mean, everything I'm doing right now is because I learned how to do it. You know, I mean, I'm going to be on a call next Friday with this gal that's like really famous. This week alone, I cold DM'd 3 people that were like famous.
Wow.
And they responded to me.
That's crazy.
And I'm getting a call with them. Yeah. It's like something I talk about on the podcast and I think people hear it and they're like, oh, I can't do that. I was like, I'm telling you to do that because I'd still do that.
Yeah.
And I have people that I'm currently doing business ventures with that are life changing. It came from a cold DM.
Yeah.
Because they knew something I didn't. And, you know, so it's crazy how.
But you also have guts.
I have guts. Yeah. And I have some skills, right? It's like, I don't just say, hey, will you help me? I say, hey, I find someone they know that I might know. I'll say, hey, I've heard some things about you from James Bethea.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've learned how to make my DMs are pretty good. I know how to actually do something where they respond to it.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, I think it's so important for people to hear that you can do anything right now. Don't listen to the media. You know, you don't have to go to college anymore. I mean, that is, if it's not as clear as it ever been, like college is not necessary. It can be helpful, but there's just so many ways because of the internet really for people to figure out how to do things with real estate or anything else. So, tell me some of the things we talked about. Interest rates. You know, let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that buyers are facing right now. Because you brought up interest rates, right? Interest rates right now are at the highest point they've been in a long time. And we thought they were going to come down multiple times and they haven't. And we don't know what's going to happen. You know, we could see rates go up even more in the summer. We've got an election this year and people are really facing the challenges of buying a home right now is not an easy thing to do. It's not possible for a lot of people. And so I think that the people right now that are buying homes, they're people that understand that the alternative is more expensive.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just the reality.
I mean, if you're listening to this, or maybe not, but I've heard it a million times, when you're renting, you're paying 100% APR.
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
You said it. I've said it a million times.
It's true. I mean, it's true. It gets thrown around on the internet a lot. But the only time that you want to pay rent is if you're in a place that you're not certain that you want to make it your home.
Of course.
I mean, it's just 100%. Other than that, I mean, I had a guy talking to me yesterday and I was like, because I always ask buyers when I meet with them on the mortgage side of things, they sit down with me. I'm like, hey, why do you want to buy a house? And I try to lead them into thinking way more long-term than just this house. Yeah. Right. And this guy said, he said, my parents never owned a home. Uh-huh. And he said, I'm 27 years old and I've moved 26 times in my life. Ooh. And he said, it messed me up. He said, every time someone wanted to sell or raised rents on me and we couldn't afford it, he's like, I've moved 26 times.
Wow.
He's like, and so we ended up getting into the financial side of it. For him, it was this real emotional thing. I need to call a place home. I'm getting married in May, and I don't want my kids and my family to have the life we had. That it was really unstable. I've got this guy in my office, a really close friend of mine, Jonathan, and he moved here from Switzerland, and he's also, I think they've been here since November of 2023. They're moving into their fourth house. Right now. And they're having a heck of a time getting approval because there's a lot of people trying to rent and they want a credit check and they want this and that. And he's still trying to figure out how to prove income and establish credit. And it's like, he told me, it's like his daughter, they got a little baby girl. And he's like, man, she wants to stay somewhere. And my wife wants to stay somewhere. I want to stay somewhere. What do you think? And so renting is something that it has its place. Yep. But if someone can find a way to buy a house, I think they need to. And I think that people understand that more in 2024 than they did in 2023 in the beginning when rates first went up. Yeah. A lot of people now that I talk to, they actually know what's going on with the southern border with 13 million people coming over the border. They know what's going on with regulation and they're not seeing enough homes being built. And the average home buyer right now that I meet with, I don't have to persuade them. They know, and they know that their payment's not going to be swell.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
but it's kind of like, it's the lesser of two evils right now for most people.
Yeah. It's either you, in some ways, as you were saying that, I thought it's either you, even though the bank owns the home, it's either you own your rent or you don't. Mm-hmm. And when I say you own your rent, like either you're in control of your rent, like when you have a mortgage, you're technically in control of that. Mm-hmm. The bank has set a term for you, your lender has set a term for you, and you get to, it's technically locked in for 30 years. As a renter, you actually, the only way in California you can adjust rents is to sell, get rid of. If you got a tenant in there for 10 years, the only way you can adjust that or change it is either sell or do something catastrophic to basically either get someone out or change their rent. You can't just kick people out in California, especially with I think it's the Maurice Shriver Act. It's literally impossible to get people to go, but so people just sell and then they find a way to get rid of you. Moral of the story is like you don't control your destiny when you're renting. Mm-hmm. Not in this market, not right now. Yeah. You probably have seen it more than I have. Yeah. But if you have a mortgage, maybe a little higher than you want to pay, but at least you know what you're getting into for the next 15, 10, 5 years,
Yeah, I think in closing on this subject, if someone is wanting to put themselves in a position to buy a house, but they're uncertain about the payment, the rates, and all these things that are going on, they need to really think through the fundamentals of the housing market right now. We're 10 million plus homes behind what we need. Mm-hmm. We're not seeing enough homes being built. We have an influx of a population because of millennial family formation. And now we have the illegal immigration. That's a huge factor. And it just doesn't look great, And so I think that unless you're planning on renting for a short period of time, you have to become mortgage ready. And I was talking with a lady who runs housing and urban development, a part of HUD, last week, Friday. And she was telling me, how many of the people are you meeting with right now that they're not mortgage ready, their income, their credit? I said, too many, way too many.
What would your percentage, if you had to guess, on the people that you talk to? Yeah.
60, maybe 70, a lot. It's
and it's probably, we had this conversation on what the middle class was.
Yeah.
But it's probably people who make a lot of money too.
They make 60, 70, 80 grand. Yeah. But if you make 60, 70, 80 grand right now in this market, you got 2 car payments and you don't have any money to put down, you're going to have a hard time buying a house in California. Yep. Unless you have a cosigner or someone giving you a big down payment, You're going to have to figure out how to increase your income or get out of debt or both. And so that's really what she was trying to tell me is we have a program right now where if you send them to us, we have educational programs that try to help people become mortgage ready. And at the end of the day, it's all the same. Like figure out how to raise your income.
Yep.
Don't get in bad debt. Try to get the mentality of spending money on assets that go up in value and not down in value, like flat screen TVs and stuff like that. And I think we're in a time right now where people are realizing that, it's like,
as you're saying that, I thought of, this was a tip that like changed me and my wife's, projection for wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Her parents, when we were getting married, it just came up in a random dinner conversation. They said that when we got married, we lived on one salary.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time I was like, well, how do you do that? And one of the things that set us up to buy our first house was we got married and we lived off of my salary only.
Yep.
And we put my wife's money into a credit union that we had no credit cards. We had no debit card. We had no checks. The only way we could get money out of it is if we both went and we both signed our name on it to get the money out. By year one, we both were making really good money when we got married. By year one, we had an absurd amount of money to basically go buy something with.
Because you guys had some checks and balances between you and the money.
It was hard. It wasn't.
There's no emotional spending because you have to fit. You have enough time to decide that we're going to both drive down to the bank and sign our names. And by the time you even get halfway through that, you're like, we don't need it.
It was a 25-minute drive, an hour in traffic. And
maybe later.
And I don't even know if at that point they had a way to access like our stuff online.
Mm-hmm.
So we had no idea how much money was in there. We just didn't know.
Yeah.
And over time, it was one of the, in terms of like advice for us as we got married, it was one of the best pieces of, I don't even think he was trying to say it as advice.
Mm-hmm.
He was just talking about how, that's how they saved money, was they lived off of one salary. And we lived off of one salary for, man, I want to say 3 years, something like that. And then the next step was we decided if we couldn't buy a car cash, we wouldn't buy it.
Yeah.
So those are the two things that have really helped us. And I drive a dope 2014 Prius because we've been to car dealerships multiple times, and we always sit down and have this conversation is, are we going to take $30, $40, $50, $60,000 out of our bank account to buy a car? And the answer is the 4 times we've done it has always been no. And so like you're saying, creating these checks and balances.
So good.
Where we haven't. I literally drive, all my subcontractors make fun of me because I look like a city inspector when I drive up in my little 2014 Prius.
But you probably got some pride in that.
I do.
Yeah. No,
I do.
It's funny. I remember
it's paid for.
I remember one of the times when I set up a budget and all my money hits my account and it all goes to bills and then the rest goes into investments every month. I had dollar cost average to where like my bank account goes down almost zero.
Yeah.
And so I remember the first time I was in the line at Costco and there was like 25 people behind me and she's like ringing up all the stuff. And then she's like, okay. And so I go and I swipe my card and she says, sorry, sir. It said it's not approving. And I just remember like looking at my debit card, and, like feeling insecure, like everyone in the store stopped shopping and all looked at me like this. He's broke. And I felt broke. I felt broke.
Were you broke though?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
But I felt broke.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no. I felt like I needed to get on an intercom and say, I have lots of money. I'm not poor. I swear. But it was funny. And it's like, that's happened a few times since. And now when that happens, I just laugh about it. It's kind of funny. I was like, this is what it actually looks like to, in my opinion, to do life well. Is that you actually have checks and balances and governors on everything in your life.
Yeah. And it is. It's I think our plumber pulled up the other day in like a $90,000 Denali truck. And I'm like, I just shook my head. I'm like, like this is a dope truck.
Mm-hmm.
But you won't see me driving one of these.
Yeah.
I won't. Like I can't justify spending $90,000 on a car because I have to go to our bank and write a check, cash your check, and it goes directly out of my account into.
Unless that's what you really want in life, which for some people it is,
Yep.
But definitely not just to drive
no
$1,000 truck. But like if that's your goal and you're a car guy, dude, go nuts.
No, you drive. Is it a Bronco?
I have a Bronco.
Yeah, and it's a dope car.
It is,
but that's something that I don't know whether you bought it or renovated it, but like that's something that for me, if when I get to your status, I'm gonna buy a 1969 Mustang, and I already have it.
Like a fastback?
Not a fastback. I don't even like the fastback. I like the coupe.
Nice.
Just that's my car, but it'll be cash. It'll be under $30,000, and I'll be happy.
But classics go up in value, dude.
I know, but for me, that's
not denali.
No.
All right.
Moral of the story
at least we tell our wives that. This is an investment, honey.
I could justify that investment.
Oh yeah.
Because at the end of the day, your car, whatever you paid for it or whatever you put into it, there's a pretty good chance that you could get that back out. Almost the exact same
problem.
If not more.
Yeah.
And the same thing. If I bought a $25,000 Mustang, I feel like in 5, 10, 20 years, I'd be able to get at least close to that amount out.
Yeah.
It's not going to depreciate in value like a, brand new Denali or something.
Yeah. There's a video of my business coach, Rick, on Instagram walking through his man cave, and he's showing his whole, it looks like Jay Leno's garage. He has this collection of all these really cool classic cars. In fact, he's got a really cool Mustang that I saw him buy at Mecum in Orlando.
Oh, yep.
But one of the things he says when he's showing it, which is why this video's got over 100,000 views, is in the end, he said, I didn't do this till I was 65 years old. I waited my whole career. I worked really hard for this. He's like, and I did not spend this kind of money. So he makes a point to tell people like, this is not, I'm 65, and he also is like, he's not attached to it. I mean, he lets people drive them when they get there because they need to be driven, and he doesn't drive them all the time. So yeah, it's important for people to have delayed gratification.
Yep.
It's not because, you're probably not going to drive a Prius forever. But right now, you understand the value of $60,000 or whatever a car is, and you know what you can turn that into.
Correct.
And so you're never going to see money differently because you know the value of what it can do.
Well, and I think I could do 60 or 80,000 on a car, or I could invest this into a small property or something and either renovate it.
Yep.
Even if it was just to make 70, I put in 50 and get 70. Like that to me is sexier than driving a dope car.
Yep. Yeah, I've got the car thing out of my system, man. I had one sports car. I got a bunch of tickets, and I didn't like the way I felt when I pulled up places and people would look at me. And I was like, this just isn't me. So I sold it. I like the Bronco. It's pretty cool because, number one, it feels really fun to drive it because it's like old and you just feels like it's gonna like run all over the road. It's just got that old nostalgic feel to it.
Yeah.
And then everyone waves at you in a Bronco. It's old people, kids.
It's a dope.
It doesn't put out that that vibe that like a Lambo would or something. Nothing wrong with Lambos if you have one. I like them too.
It's a dope vehicle.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
and I got a really good deal on it. So.
Yeah. And did you buy it renovated or?
Yes.
Yeah.
It would have cost so much more to try to do that to it.
Yeah.
So it was a doctor in Yuba City who was having a third kid, and his wife made him build a new house, and that's like the perfect story. That's how you want to buy a car.
Yes, sir.
It'd been on the market for 3 months, and he kept lowering it, and finally bought it. And so,
good job, man.
Yeah, no, it was good before the pandemic. So I probably should have sold it a couple years ago. I probably could have really killed it, but
but like you said, I mean, 5, 10, 15 years from now, you won't say that.
No.
Like, dang, this is
even in like 5 days from now, because I don't drive it all winter.
Yeah.
But like this is the time of year where I get to drive it.
Oh,
I'll drive it to work because it's nice in the morning because it's not enclosed, So this time of year is the best time for it.
That's awesome.
Well, bro, I really appreciate you making time to come sit down with me and, just share your story with people. I think there's a lot that people can get from it right now. You definitely, people will say, oh, easy for him, NFL. No. This is a guy who clearly has had a lot of discipline in your life, and you've been a student, hopefully people heard that you literally learned everything.
Can I put a disclaimer on the NFL thing?
Yeah.
I sat the bench. So playing in the NFL is different. So I sat the bench, and I was always every Tuesday was cut day in the NFL. And I was at the bottom of the barrel, and I realized that if I don't make a play just in practice, that I was going to get cut. So everyone in the NFL doesn't make millions of dollars. I was at the I was at the bottom of the barrel.
It's true.
I was young. I know this seems like a lot of money to people, but I think I was making league minimum, which is $250,000 a year. But I only got it for a short period of time, and I had to live off of that.
Yep.
And I actually ran into a wall when I finished playing in the NFL because it was hard for me to get a job. Because for 3.5, 4 years, I was playing a game. And so then I went to find a job. I was like, hey, but I'm a UC Berkeley grad and blah, blah, blah. And I thought I was like, my confidence was high. And they're like, hold on, what have you been doing for 4 years?
Yeah.
So I had to live off that little bit of money that I made for the 3. I mean, and then you get taxed. I didn't have houses or anything. So I was probably only bringing home like 150, 175 of that.
In the Bay Area.
Exactly. Or where
nothing.
Exactly. And so it's like, it may be easy to say, but like I started out, when me and my wife started out, we started out with like $8,000 in debt from our wedding. So we literally we both had really good jobs, but we had about $8,000 in debt and we started with nothing. We got married and the marriage was like the game changer because of like what I told you is we saved all of her paycheck.
Yep.
But the NFL wasn't like, I didn't bring NFL money into our marriage. My NFL money was gone. Yeah, my NFL money was gone by the time we had met because I had been living off of it for 3-4 years, working odd end jobs. I was working at Best Buy just because I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm just gonna get a job.
I'll do whatever it takes.
Exactly. I was working at Best Buy.
I'll do whatever it takes.
But my savings with the houses or the house that I had, just taking care of that kind of stuff, it got depleted I want to say within the first year and a half. I basically had $10,000 in my bank account.
Dude, that's so good, man. I think that I challenge people's belief systems. I challenge my own, and I always invite my friends to, because the difference between where we're at now and where we want to be is completely based on skills we don't have. And some of us have bad beliefs and we just don't realize that our beliefs are keeping us where we are. And then just the willingness to always be curious, learn, and execute without being afraid, which is one of the first things you said is you have nothing to lose.
Yep.
Lose your fear. Failing is part of the deal. You hear it. It's on posters and stuff, but it's so true, man. If you realize you have nothing to lose and you just go after things in life, you are going to stumble upon something that's going to work.
Yep.
And so I'm so glad you told that story, man. Well, thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. I hope you guys got a lot out of it. Feel free to ask questions. Like I said, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.